All right, we are back. I've got a new friend, and somebody I can already tell that we are just going to rock and roll and jive today because this is a topic. If you follow the show religiously, you probably heard me talking about this on Tuesday, but talking a lot about how to really decipher when it's time to be courageous and take risks and take chance and dare, as my guest would say today, and when it's like, hey, I'm already that type. I kind of need to find that sweet spot, right? So, without further ado, David Wood, man, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good and even better after our chat earlier. I feel excited about this.
Right. Yeah. So I read it immediately and I was like, this is going to be fantastic. So I'm glad you're joining us here today. And I'm glad that kind of, came to fruition. So first of all, before we get into all that, because we do have a lot to discuss here today, but I want to know a little bit about who you are, what led to the work you're doing. Obviously you said you're a native Australian, you're here in the States. So kind of take us through that evolution of what led you here and what led you to the work that you're doing in this whole daring mantra that you've kind of adopted.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think, you know, most of us have a point in our life where, some kind of inflection point where maybe things change for us. And I think a lot of us have some kind of traumatic experience in our past that had an impact on us.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to when I was 7 years old, I had a really unfortunate experience of watching my little sister die.
Oh, Jesus.
She was in a traffic accident and I was there. We're coming home from school and I basically watched it happen. And I didn't think it had an impact on me. I didn't know that it had an impact on me. I just grew up, as you do. We didn't talk about it. I didn't go to the funeral like that. And
really?
Yeah. Well, back in those days, I mean, I'm old, man. I'm 50 now.
But was
So
that like a family dynamic thing, or was that just culturally kind of the way society was back then?
they
Really?
just thought it was best to not take the kids and expose them to that,
I see. To protect. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So all I knew is I grew up and I got really good at school. I got
Hmm.
really good. Like I came top of my school. I studied mathematics and became an actuary,
Hmm.
which is like high level projections for 100 years, statistics, probability, and ended up getting a job in Park Avenue in New York. So I'm from Australia, but I went to New York and I'm consulting to Fortune 50 companies and
Hmm.
helping them with risk management and their international pension plans.
Hmm.
So I didn't know this at the time, but I developed this intellectual stream of energy and got really good with systems and making results happen in time and space. That was my thing.
Hmm.
What I was missing was the relational side.
Hmm.
Because of the tragedy, I just learned how to not feel. And I'd learned how, and I'm Australian. So it's almost a law that you're not
Is
supposed to
it?
feel too much as an Australian man. Culturally, it wasn't accepted. So that seemed to be working until it didn't. And I noticed I was having problems in my relationships and stress
Yeah.
and eventually anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
So I've spent the last 20 years balancing myself out and learning how to be more relational, how
Hmm.
to feel, how to track what's happening in you, how to track what's happening in me,
Yeah.
how to deepen connection. So I think one of the things, there are a lot of great coaches that are good with the business side, and
Hmm.
there are a lot of great coaches that are good with the empathy and the feelings and the relational side. I like to think that I can bring both to the conversation. So
Yeah.
we can geek out on either side and I'm happy. In
Tell
fact,
me.
I want us to have both.
Yes. Tell me this, because you and I are very similar birds in that regard. Definitely bottled up the emotions, completely different circumstances, albeit traumatic, for me as well. Not nearly as severe as yours. God bless. That is unbelievable. And I'm terribly sorry to hear even today about what happened. That's awful, man.
Thank you.
But tell me why that matters, because there's so many people, and I was one of them, and you probably were as well. You enter into the workspace, right? You're in your professional lives, and you see there being no relation to or credence to having the emotional, empathetic side bleed into professional workspace, because most people are like, this is work and this is personal life, and they should not intersect or have any kind of commonality whatsoever. So tell me the opportunity that's being missed if people carry and conduct themselves in that manner.
Yeah. Wow. This is such a rich topic. We could do 3 or 4 episodes on this. One,
Yeah.
one example, let's say you're a manager in a corporation. If
Uh-huh.
you want to pretend that people are two different people, there's work and there's life, and keep it separate, and you come from maybe the old school or the Australian school that feelings aren't that important, they're just going to slow us down.
Yep.
What's going to happen is you're going to spend way too much time dealing with unproductive behaviors and unproductive teams, because people are human and we are feeling beings. That's science. So there's a beautiful quote I got from Brene Brown, but she might have gotten it from somewhere else. You can either spend a reasonable amount of time addressing the real feelings that are there, or an unreasonable amount of time dealing with the unproductive behaviors.
Yeah, it's totally true.
Yeah, and that's from the manager side, but from our personal side, at work, if you try and bottle yourself up and try and pretend to be somebody else because you're going to fit in, you're not going to be happy, and you're going to end up leaving the job or getting sick. So I think it just makes sense from both sides. We got to find a way, that artful way, to be expressed, to embrace all of our strengths and the things we don't think are strengths, so that we can bring all of ourselves to work or to our business.
Yeah. Well, I think specifically if you're an entrepreneur and once you start growing and you have employees and you have strategic partners or clients and, the things that we aspire to have with a business, right? When you lack that ability to connect with people, I had some horrific nicknames from my employees regarding me, right? Like stuff that I don't even want to repeat, that I had heard about through the grapevine about what people said.
You don't want to tell us one?
One was a slave driver. One was, yeah. Yep. But basically I told myself, and I justified, which by the way, a stark contrast to who I am today. Like if you go back and watch even videos of I would do videos for internal updates and stuff like that. If you watch this person looks like he's an empty human being, right? But in my mind, it was, I'm putting on my boss hat, right? Yeah. And it bled into my personal relationships. It bled into my relationship, at the time with my girlfriend, then fiance, now wife. It just affected everything, right? And here's the thing.
Right.
Here's the thing about feelings. You can't pick and choose which ones you want to exert and when, right? Like you bottle them up, they all get bottled up. And then the bad ones come out, like the depression, the anxiety and stuff like that, because you're just innately designed to have that kind of emoting, right? Or having that expression, right? When you don't have that, you bottle it up, all the negative shit starts to come up, and then you just lose the ability to have any kind of semblance of positive emotions come up, So that was kind of my story. I don't know if that's kind of what it started looking like for you, or if where you reached that inflection point or breaking point, like you talked about.
Well, when you said empty human being, I related to that because my wife, when I went and finally went to therapy and said, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
And the doctor said, "Well, it sounds like you never grieved for your sister, and I think I can help you."
Yeah.
And I was like, "My God, I've got feelings." What? I took my girlfriend at the time, my ex-girlfriend, I brought her to one of the sessions and said, "Can you tell her what's happening with me? Because I want to get back together with her and find a solution." And she said, "Oh my God, this makes sense. He's always been a cardboard cutout." Now, if that's you, if you're listening to this and there's even a piece of that's you, what you may find is that some prospects just aren't going to buy from you.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to feel you. Some staff will quit or they won't take the position because they don't feel you. Yeah. So I think this makes good business sense. And we talked before this call about a sweet spot or a power zone when it comes to daring. But I think there's one here when it comes to balancing business results and making stuff happen and earning money and feeling and connecting with humans.
Yeah.
I don't want any of us to have just one.
Yeah.
I want to find that sweet spot where you can have systems and you can create things in time and space.
Yeah.
And you make room to firstly become aware of what you're feeling. I wasn't taught how to even know that anything was going on. Mm-hmm. Can I track it? And then secondly, how does that inform this relationship? Like, I notice I'm feeling a little defensive right now. Let me just see what that's about, because I want to let that go. Or I notice I'm feeling a bit tense as I hear you say that, because I'm worried we're not going to get to any solution. Like, the body actually gives us an incredible amount of information. And I spent the first 30 years of my life ignoring it completely.
Man, that's tough. So like you say, we could talk for 3 hours on this.
I know.
Did you go to conventional therapy, or what form of therapy did you partake in?
Yeah, I went to a psychiatrist.
Okay.
At the age of 23.
Okay.
And that was a real opener for me in terms of like unlocking a floodgate that I didn't know was there.
Yeah.
And then at the age of 27, I went and did a personal development course,
Okay.
because I'd never really done any of that. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, they look like a bunch of self-help junkies. They smile too much and they're all wearing name tags, but I'm going to get in and out. And I'll only do one course because I thought that self-help was weak.
Yeah.
Thank goodness I did the first one, and it opened me enough to where I was curious about the second one. I thought, all right, let's do just one more and then I'm out. And that second one cracked me open. And I realized that there are people in this life who actually care about the planet. They care about people and they care about me,
Mm-hmm.
and they want my life to be better. Let me take on the humility to see if I can actually learn something.
Would you say that was like the major shift that happened for you then? Like it just happened like that and you never looked
That
back?
was one of the
Defining
biggest.
moment?
Yeah, but when I say a shift, it didn't happen in a moment.
Okay, sure.
It was in the second course. I did have a huge moment that got me hooked on coaching.
Interesting.
And then I didn't really want to do the third course, but if I did the third course, I found out they would train me as a coach. And I was hooked now on coaching. So I did the third course, and I'm so lucky I did, because I didn't know what self-expression meant. They said you'll be fully expressed in every area of your life, and if you're not, it will be an integrity issue for you. I'm like, what bullshit is that? I don't know what the hell that means.
Yeah.
But since doing it, I discovered I am so expressed. Like, people know me. I don't tend to hold stuff back.
Yeah.
If I want to paraglide, I paraglide. If I want to get up on stage and risk looking like a fool doing improv, I will do it now. And before that course, I wouldn't do that. I was in a box and I didn't even know it.
It's interesting. The reason I was asking is because a lot of people, when it relates to trauma, they have to go to deeper levels of the subconscious brain to actually make those radical shifts. So that's why I was asking. So it's interestingly, I guess, enough that you were able to do that with more of a conventional, but it sounds like some of this self-development work or this self-help thing you were doing is pretty transformative though.
Oh, and there's a lot of crossover, right?
Okay.
There's a lot of crossover. So the therapy sessions with the psychiatrist probably took me to some very deep places, and I got to unlock something that would have held me back for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Now it's still there in many ways, but now I at least understand, and I can let someone know. Like if I start dating someone, I can let them know I have trouble falling asleep in bed with someone else. I don't feel safe. And so that can be, an issue. Let's talk about it. Whereas before, I wouldn't even know what was going on. I'd be judging myself. We wouldn't have the conversation because that's too awkward and weird. And then we just break up.
Yeah.
But personal growth and coaching and reading books, I'm a fan of all of these things. We all find what's right for us at the right time.
Yeah, totally. And I'm glad you say that, because for me, the neurolinguistic programming, the NLP, the EFT, that stuff.
EFT, NLP, love those acronyms.
I mean, that was for me going through, and I just talked about this recently with my actual therapist came on and joined me on the show, and I talked about the experience, but like I did a 90-day deep dive with rapid transformational therapy, a form of hypnotherapy. And we made some like radical shifts, stuff that I didn't even know was there. And I did years of conventional therapy, but like, there's still stuff that the subconscious will protect you from, right? Your amygdala, as we call it, Amy, her job is to keep things in order, right? And so some things just refuse to shift with conventional. And it was honestly me being stubborn and not willing to go there, push myself there. But man, the RTT and diving into the subconscious really forced me to make that transformation. And I had a moment similar to what kind of you're describing, where it was like, it was a visualization of a particular incident and kind of imagining my younger self. And she like had me envision that, like the two of us, my grown self now, and like visualizing how I'd carved this path out for myself and had made it, right, quote unquote, and like absorbing the younger version of myself and like merging with that person and like being like, hey, it's okay, I've always had your back. In that moment, dude, I lost it. I started crying in the session. It was crazy. So I think these are big things that people need to address, and it's so liberating. I think that's the word that I would use personally to say what that felt like. And so many other things start to happen, other areas that you can explore, and all these little dominoes that you didn't realize were there in terms of your emotions start popping up. You're like, well, that feels pretty good to feel excited and to feel, happy and jubilant and all these various emotions that have been buried for so long start to kind of like percolate and pop up as you deal with some of these other issues. So anyways, I'm sure that was somewhat your experience as well as you dealt with these things.
Well, what comes up hearing you speak is, firstly, for anyone listening who's like, yeah, this is all good to talk about the touchy-feely stuff, but I want to crush it. I want to crush it in my business.
Yeah.
I want to make the point we're saying that this is a path.
Totally it is.
Crushing it in your business.
Totally it is.
And the meta conversation I'm getting from this is when you said, I didn't even know that was there.
Yeah.
So the real question that presents itself is, how do we step outside ourselves?
That is tough.
Spot some of our blind spots. It's like if you ask a fish, how's the water? I imagine the fish would say, what water?
Right. So that's the scary part.
Yeah. So how do you step outside? And I think one way is, of course, submersion, be with a bunch of other people who are also growing so that their breakthroughs become yours.
How did you know? How did you know that there was water around you, so to speak?
Well, I think I learned about water when I did therapy. I learned about water when I did landmark education, the personal growth course. I learned about water when I coach people, because I'll hear myself saying something.
I see.
And then I'm like, oh, and I'm speaking to myself too. And I learned about water, each time I work with a coach. Yeah. As well, because the coach is being paid to tell me stuff that maybe other people aren't even going to say.
Yeah, totally. Cool. All right. So let's talk, because there's something really important that you said that I'm glad you validated that, because it's not just about this like woo-woo kumbaya, let's all feel good and dive into our emotions. This has a dramatic effect on how you perform in business. So let's talk about that, because I think the most important aspect of that is daring, putting yourself out there, right? Because that requires you to make yourself vulnerable, right? And specifically with starting a business, you've got to really put yourself out in uncomfortable terrain, so to speak. Yeah. So why would you say that playing it safe is the worst thing that a young entrepreneur could do?
Well, I say playing it safe can be the most dangerous thing you can do, ironically. Yeah. And it's because, and this perhaps comes from my background as an actuary and a risk management consultant. I'm all about managing risk. Yeah. I'll jump off a cliff, but I'll wear the helmet and I'll do the training and I'll wear the paraglider. Yeah. Right? So I think when we think about risk, we want to manage the risk and we don't want to feel, for example, rejected. Yeah. So if I ask that woman out, or in a business sense, if I go and ask that celebrity for an endorsement, I might feel stupid and I might feel rejected. So we want to manage the risk of that, and maybe we decide we're not going to do it. And that's fine and valid. You might decide, I'm not going to risk 40% of my savings on this bet. I think 80% chance it's going to pay off, 20% chance it's not. That's a pretty good bet. I'm going to risk 40% of my savings. You might do that, or you might say it's too big a risk. I'm not going to do it because I can't bear the thought of losing my savings. So we're always talking about risk management, but I think what we miss is the risk of not doing it. Okay. And the risk of not fully going for what feels right to you. Yeah. Even if it feels uncomfortable, if it feels right, the risk is that you're going to be on your deathbed looking back with regret.
That's an interesting point, because I'm thinking back and having conversations with people. It's always about what's there to lose, not what's there to gain in most situations when you're talking about assessing risk. So is that kind of what you're effectively saying?
Well, no, I wasn't. I think that's another good point, that yes, there's a risk that I might feel stupid or I might lose this money, but what's the upside and is it worth it? And if the upside's worth it, I tend to go for it. I'm willing to take that risk. So maybe one strategy here is just get present to the upside. Yeah. But I'm saying there's a risk in not doing everything. Yeah. And the risk is that you're going to feel shitty about yourself. Yeah. The risk is you're going to feel like I played small. And I have a bias, I'll admit it. I have a personal bias towards being fully expressed and going for what I want so that I can feel good about myself. And I want that for everyone else because of my bias. Now, if everyone listening to this, if you notice you have a bias too, that you want to feel good about yourself and feel expressed, and you'd like to feel regret-free on your deathbed, then it puts it in a new light. I want you to balance up the risks of what could go wrong if you do something,
Mm.
with the risk of how you could feel if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's an exercise that I recommend that's really simple and easy. Get a pen and a piece of paper, and you write down all the areas where you might be playing it a little bit safe.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you not calling and asking for their business?
Mm.
Who are you not calling and asking to partner with you or work with you? Who are you not calling and asking to endorse you?
Mm.
Who, if we get into some of the personal stuff, who have you not apologized to?
Yeah.
Who have you not asked for an apology from?
Yeah. Or why does stuff matter to you? The stuff that you're pursuing? Because if it's because you mentioned something I think is really important. And I mean to commandeer what you were saying, I apologize, but
No, I'm interested in this
but
question.
but here's the thing. So for me, and I can only relate it back to my own story, so I apologize for continuing to relate back to my own thing here. But what I discovered was part of my messed up stuff that I had, the conditioning that I had, was the prove myself mentality, right? And so for me, becoming a successful entrepreneur, and I had this goal of making $1 million by the time I was 30, right? That was like this thing that I had. But what I thought was an external goal of just accomplishment was actually an internal goal of proving myself, not to everybody else, not just everybody else, but to me too, right? So I think you really have to be in tune and in touch with why you want the things that you're after.
Well, that's a good point too. Yeah, if you can get down to why would I do this at all?
Right.
So maybe on the sheet of paper, left-hand column can be, where you're playing it a little bit small,
Yeah.
and then draw a line down. And in the right-hand column, what's possible?
Yeah.
What's available to you if
Yeah.
you did this?
Mm.
And then ultimately what I want to know is, does it feel right for you? I'm not saying comfortable.
Mm.
Does it feel right? Like it would be a self-expression for you to go and do those things? And would you feel good about yourself after having done them? Even if you got a no
Mm.
or a poor reaction from every single person, would you feel proud of yourself?
Yeah.
That's a great test for a decision.
Mm.
Here's an example. And it was a big insight for me. I went to this retreat with some people I admire, thought leaders, speakers. Some of them really made a name for themselves, and so I was like, "Wow, I get to be with these people. This is amazing."
Yeah.
And I realized during those 4 days, there were 4 times when I was on my edge, and I had to be really daring.
Mm.
One was when I pitched Jack Canfield from Chicken Soup to write a book together.
Oh gosh, that's a huge page.
Yeah, that was it. Now
Yeah.
I know Jack, but
Okay.
but I assume he gets 1,000 pitches a year.
Of
I don't want
course.
to be just some chump coming up, dude. Let's write a book together.
Yeah.
But at the time, he'd said something, and I was responding to it, and it felt right, so I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I did that was edgy for me was I met a producer, an Oscar-winning producer, and I just met him. And I said, look, I know this is a big ask, but what would it take for me to do a ride along with you the next time you're shooting a film?
Mm-hmm.
I asked a woman out, and by asking her out, I asked her if she'd like to go to Colombia with me. Like, hey, why don't we travel? Let's go to Colombia together.
Yeah.
And there was someone I would love to coach, and I was a bit in awe of her, and yet I went and asked her anyway. And the insight I had was that even if I got a no to all 4 of those things,
Mm-hmm.
it was right for me to ask. And that was when I realized that it's not about the result. That's gravy. That's a bonus.
Yeah.
If you get a yes, it's a bonus. But I want you to be self-expressed and doing what's right for you. If you get 20 no's, you get 20 no's. But are you daring? And are you going for it? And does that feel right? Now, what I think we're going to get to later in this episode is when you go overboard and it's not actually right. You're daring for other reasons. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But for now, getting a yes, like if Jack had said yes, wow, you would have blown me over. The producer did say yes. I got 3 no's and 1 yes out of that. But again, the yes was just a pure bonus.
So is it more about, because what I kind of hear you saying is that building up that muscle, so to speak, of the daring muscle, of just getting in the habit of exerting or flexing that muscle so that it just becomes like more about the journey of daring versus the, like you said, not the reward. Because I know a lot of people that their inclination is, I'm going to, well, this sometimes actually would work for me, is I would think about what's the worst that could happen from this? They say no big deal. So what I hear you saying is it's more about the process of just daring versus maybe even thinking about any of the ramifications or rewards or consequences thereof. No?
Well, I think you've brought in two new elements that are really valuable. One is, yeah, you could again on this sheet of paper, which is getting wider and wider, you could have another column and go, what is the worst outcome?
Yeah.
And am I willing to live with that?
Yeah.
That's a really practical thing to do to make sure you're not overextending, because sometimes, like, the worst outcome of me not having medical insurance is I go bankrupt,
right,
or maybe die. And I'm not okay with that. So I'm not going to take that kind of a risk.
right.
So I think that's a good point you brought in. The other one is, you raise a question, does it get easier over time? Are you building and developing a muscle so that the things that were daring last year may not feel daring this year? And I would say yes. In my experience, I noticed that my life has been naturally oriented towards daring. My mother told me a while back that as a kid, if she wanted me to do something, the best way was to tell me it couldn't be done. Because I'm like, oh yeah. And like I'm scared of heights. And I went and paraglided solo over the Himalayas at 10,000 feet. I lean into it. I've been scared of abandonment, probably because of what happened with my sister as a kid.
Yeah.
And so I would explore open relationships and date a woman who's got other partners to see, can I manage these feelings? Can I go into that? I'm not suggesting you do any of these things.
No, sure.
But the more that I practice the daring, there are some things now for me that are nothing.
Yeah.
Like apologizing to someone in an awkward conversation, that might be just a little awkward for me, versus someone else might I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Or confessing to someone, hey, like, I'm outing myself now before I've outed myself in public. There's a group that I enjoy going to in Boulder, and you're supposed to do an introduction night before you come to the group so that you know how to do it. Well, someone invited me and said, come to this thing, and I'll give you the 5-minute intro version, and I think you'll be fine. Well, I did that, and I was fine, and I've been going for 8 months now, and I still haven't done the intro night. So I'm feeling out of integrity. Like, it's just a bit off that I'm coming along and I haven't done what they would like me to do. There's one coming up in August, and I'm going to do it. That's the first one that's been available for me. But I'm probably going to sit in the whole group and say, by the way, I've been here for 8 months and I haven't done the intro night until last week. Now, that's going to feel a little awkward and a little uncomfortable, but it's not that big a deal for me because I've practiced being in integrity and coming clean when something feels off. To someone else, that might even not occur to them. There's no way I'm going to tell a whole group I've been coming to 8 months and haven't met the requirements for the group. So I do believe it does get easier, and the things that are edgy and scary for me now might horrify somebody else. So I think definitely, and I think that's a good thing, that you get to push back your comfort zone, so more and more things get to become comfortable, and I think we get to be better and better human beings.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of young entrepreneurs are asked to do, or we challenge them to do with the various programs and stuff that I'm involved with, is go out and talk to 100 people about what you're doing and see what their response is. Because I think sometimes it's the fear of just having that first conversation, and then the second one, and then the third one. By the end of it, you just start talking to everybody about it because you know what I mean? It's just you've become desensitized to that fear of stepping outside your comfort zone. I think it's part of the human experience and growing.
Yeah. So, and in fact, not just doing those 100 calls, but I find the first 3 in a given morning are the hardest. And after that, I'm in a flow. It's like, oh, all right, I got this.
Totally.
It's totally uncomfortable till you get over that hump.
Yeah. Now, so would you say that the typical entrepreneur archetype, if you will, right, or the propensity would be to be the opposite of that, right? And I'm lumping in risk and daring in the same category. Am I doing that erroneously? Would you put those two as analogies or synonyms?
No, I think they're totally linked. That daring is required because there's risk.
Okay.
If there's no risk involved, there's no daring required.
Right.
So I'm risking some potentially negative outcome, and so that requires courage or daring.
Right. So that all said, I don't want someone to listen to this and be the type like I was, right? Or like many entrepreneurs are, to go out and literally bet the farm, as I told you before we started recording,
right?
And end up bankrupt under a bridge for the sake of, but I'm being daring and I'm taking risks and I'm putting myself out there. So as you called it, a sweet spot. So how do we arrive at this sweet spot? And also too, I think as well, and maybe this is conflating or adding another complexity that's not needed or an added wrinkle, but there may be areas that you're willing to be daring and take risks, but then other areas you're not, right? So I think that some people think, well, I'm already, daring and whatever in this aspect of my life. And so they don't push themselves in others while finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's really difficult to navigate that.
Yeah. Well, let's split those up because I think those are two really juicy subjects.
Mm-hmm.
The first one about this idea of a sweet spot, let's talk about the shadow side of daring. So with almost anything in your life, you can take it too far. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that. I thought that daring and just being like the spiritual warrior, I thought I had no limits, and I thought I could bust through anything. And
this way epiphany, right? This was pre your counseling and the breakthrough and all that, right?
No, this is post counseling.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
I'm coaching and I'm living life and I'm exploring all my edges, right? I'm being daring.
Got it.
And I thought there are no limits to being daring. I mean, I'm going to wear the helmet when I paraglide and whatever, but what I found is it is possible to push myself too far. And I think this will tie into your example of betting the farm. I think that's another version of going too far. Mm-hmm. What I did is in my example, I was exploring open relationships because I wanted to see, could I not possess someone? Could I not have ownership of someone? Can I open my heart and like go into these fears I have? And I was exploring that. And then what I found was happening is I was starting to lose sleep. In fact, by lose sleep, I mean, I had some nights where I got 20 minutes of sleep, which is not a lot of sleep.
No.
And when I was sleeping, it was kind of like a half sleep with dreams of airplanes shooting me and riddling me with bullets. And I'd wake up with adrenaline shooting through my body. So this is a clue that I would now these days say, hey, David, maybe you've gone past your edge, right? I'm all for finding your edge and riding your edge and being daring, but maybe you've gone past your edge to something your body just isn't up for. Maybe something that your psyche isn't up for, and this is too much for you. And what I'd done is I'd gone into trauma. I was in a trauma zone. I didn't even know at the time what was producing this. Now I can look back and go, duh, it's obvious. But at the time, I'm just in trauma. And that's when I had to learn that there are limits and we've got to be realistic. So I think there is a sweet spot. If you're in the complacent zone, and I'll tell you some ways to identify that, then you might need more daring to kick your butt.
Yeah.
And as you said, this can be in different areas of your life. Maybe talk about business for the moment. If you're a little bit too complacent and you're not riding your edge, go and find your edge and ride it. If you are the kind of person that's burning the candle at both ends and you're not spending time with your family, you're not exercising, you're not eating well, you're just thinking, I'm just going to crush it.
Right.
You may have gone too far. If you're leveraged, you're in debt, and if you lose everything here, then your family's going to be out on the street. And I had a client who was in that position. He's like, I just must succeed. And I'm just constant, been 5 years that the business was not taken off. And his wife's like, we're going to be out on the street. You're not waking up. Well, for him, I said, suck it up, get a job, let go of this business and be a man. So it depends where you are. And here are some ways you can tell. The first zone, complacency, stagnation, or boredom, lack of growth in any area. You can apply this to business, apply it to relationships, apply it to your health, whatever. Though these might be signs that you could kick your own ass or have someone kick your ass, and be daring. Do the exercise we talked about earlier with a piece of paper and take some of that stuff on.
Yeah.
If you're in the other zone, some signs could be overwhelm, massive stress, burnout, taking on risks that you're really not willing to accept.
Yeah.
Like if you're risking losing 60% of your savings and you're really not willing to do that, maybe you don't want to be doing that.
Right.
If you're smoking, but you're really not willing to have lung cancer, wake up. If you're willing to have lung cancer, or you're willing for the risk of it, all power to you. Go and do it. But if you're not willing, if you picture being in the hospital with tubes coming out of your throat and you're like, actually, that's not a risk I'm willing to handle, then come back out of that zone. You're in the danger zone.
It's fascinating. I think the biggest thing is looking at the genesis point of a lot of this stuff, right? Because this is a manifestation of compounding interest over a long period of time, I would imagine. And maybe this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, as far as the emotional aspects of making sure that you have, and not to go back and rehash that too much, but it makes me wonder, like, where the hell does this slippery slope start in those instances, right? In relation to, okay, so for example, the guy that was the client of yours that, 5 years going, like, was he just that type of an extreme person, or was it things that happened along the way that kind of pushed him even further down that path, right? To where it became like, this is who he is, right? Like, where did that start? How could he have avoided that before it became what it was?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That makes me think about my example with the open relationships. I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know until I got into it.
That's what I'm getting at.
Would be.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I could have avoided that lesson. Now I know. And I tell you what, I manage relationships totally differently. If it's going to be an open relationship, there've got to be extraordinary circumstances for why I'd want to risk it. And I'm going to be very careful with my heart and my psyche.
Yeah.
So I didn't know about that. For this guy, this client, I don't know where he could have spotted it, but definitely there was a point where there are clues for him. Like when his wife is now saying, hey, it's been 3 years and it hasn't turned around.
Yeah.
What are the odds of that happening? And can we look at the cost?
Yeah.
He didn't even really want to hear it, which is another clue.
It is a very big clue, yeah.
I've had to look at this with my latest marketing strategy. I've spent 6 months being a guest expert on podcasts like this one. And I've had to assess that. Like, is this something I want to keep on doing? Is this going to be worth it financially? And you got to keep on assessing it. Fortunately, I've had 3 incredible clients come out of it, which has shown me that this seems like a right path. Now, if I got 6 months down and I had no clients come from it, I've got to really have a come to Jesus with myself. No offense to everybody who loves Jesus. I have to really look at that. Does this still make sense? And if, for some people who are like, I'm just going on faith and I believe in myself, I'm going to be like Walt Disney, who went bankrupt, 17 times or whatever, or approached, I really should look this up. He approached how many people for finance before someone said, we will fund a dream park where people pay to get in?
Yes.
Right.
And that's the tricky part, though.
Yeah.
Is if the self-awareness aspect would have told him, stop pursuing this. Right. But had he not stopped or he had just given into that and not done it, it wouldn't be that's the hard part.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Again, I just got goosebumps. Again, we want both. So I just read a story about a POW survivor.
Right.
And he was asked what type of people didn't make it. And he said, oh, that's easy. The optimists.
What was that from? I remember reading that.
Well, I read this. I read it in Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, she's quoting Jim Collins in Good to Great, and
Collins.
he's quoting a POW survivor, right?
That's it. That's where I read it from.
So
Yep.
he said the optimists. So what I got out of the story anyway was that we need both. We need both the dreaming aspect, that we can believe in ourselves and we can not just take the first kick or the first 10 kicks or the first 20 kicks.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be able to keep on going, and you have to have a good shot of reality that perhaps a coach or a good friend or, people around you can give you, of when to say, hey, this is not working.
Yes.
This is just not happening. And you might start looking at bailing or shifting this to a hobby while you make money to feed your family.
Yes. Well, so while you were saying that, just to show the complexities of this conversation, Man's Search for Meaning, I think is the one that's in there. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor. And he wrote like basically the essence of what a lot of the people in the concentration camps were experiencing. And one of the things that the survivors shared was that I'm probably going to oversimplify this because it's a very long, profound book, but basically with the people that like believe that something was going to happen better than after that. Right. So it was like the belief that something, even if it was irrational, that was going to happen. But at the same time, the POWs, the ones that were optimistic, they didn't make it. Right. So it's almost like it's contradictory. So we can't solve and figure out all of life's mysteries in one conversation, obviously, but it just shows you how challenging it is to manage and balance these juxtaposed against one another because it is so complex.
Well, for me, and again, maybe I have a bias, for me, it doesn't appear difficult because I'm a numbers guy and I tend to, I look at these results. I keep looking at them. I'm like, all right, let's say 50,000 revenue has come in from 6 months of this, and it's likely to snowball. So let's keep going. Like I can do that 6 months and nothing. It's like, hey, maybe it's time for a pivot. So to me, it doesn't seem that hard, but I can understand as someone I've got a friend, I've got a really good friend who just loves, he's so passionate about this. Oh God, if I say what it is, then I can't say what it is, but he's passionate about something that would transform people's health.
Okay. And
he loves it. He's so into it, and he's trying to raise funds for it. Now, the first 6 months, I think that's laudable, applause. The first year, maybe the first 2 years, if you really love it, if it's just your life, then okay, maybe you devote 5 years to it.
Yeah.
But when you get to the point where you don't have money for rent anymore, in 5 years and it's not happening, it's time to suck it up and do something else to pay the rent and keep doing it as a hobby, right? Yeah. Keep it alive.
Yeah.
So I just think I don't want anyone, and I love that book, The Dip by Seth Godin. That's a really good book on recognizing, are you in the dip where things are just difficult and it's going to get better and it's worth it? With an honest assessment of the realities, that's the key.
Yeah.
Or is this a decline that's really not ever going to get better, and I'm just going to exercise my human good judgment, free will, and step out of this and go and find another thing with better options?
Yeah. Well, I know one thing we have done here today is we have definitely validated the need for having a coach and probably a therapist in your life to help you recognize these things, because man, life is just, it's challenging. There's so
complex,
many,
right?
It's very complex. So, people sometimes, and like you said, just sometimes having the right person in your life that's going to be willing to tell you what you probably don't want to hear can really make all the difference. So I think if there's nothing else that's been validated here today, is having, specifically if you want to do big things. And I think that's maybe a little bit of an oversight for a lot of people, is that they assume that like you reach a certain pinnacle in your life or your career where like you don't still have people that coach you or mentor you or have an influence on you. It doesn't matter where you are. I mean,
no, Bill Gates has quoted as saying everybody needs a coach.
Yes. No matter where you are in your life.
Yeah. Totally. When Bill Gates wants to learn something, like he wants to be good at bridge, he goes and gets a coach.
Yeah.
He's not going to go and work it out on his own. Right. I might go and try and work it all out on my own, but Bill Gates is like, I don't have time to suck at something.
Yeah. Totally.
Actually, that's a really good quote. He should have said that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So there's a lot more we could talk about. Obviously I only got you for another 5 minutes. So What I do want you to do though is talk. There's a lot that you've got going on in terms of links and stuff that you're working on and promotional type things that you have going on that you want to talk about with our office,
Yeah,
or people are even to connect with you.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. If something on this call resonated with you and you're thinking, hey, I want to up level, or at least find out what up leveling might look like and have that kind of conversation, I invite you to request a discovery session with me. I don't charge for those sessions. One, because I enjoy doing them, but two, it's how I find out who would be appropriate for me to work with long term. So if you want to request the session, do the session, we create a plan for your life and business, and then you want to implement that on your own, I hope you'll just keep in touch and let me know how it goes.
Cool.
But if we both decide that coaching could make a great impact on your life and business, then we'll talk about ongoing coaching at that point.
Okay. And what's the link?
Yeah, the way to request that is go to my website, Play for Real.
Okay.
Playforreal.life. LIFE, and there's a big button right at the top that says request a session. I can't say yes to everybody, but I can say yes to most people who request one. Okay. And even if we don't book, if you're feeling a little shy and you're not feeling daring enough to actually get on the phone, still go through the process, because there's a life assessment that takes 5 minutes and you'll get some really good information about your life and your business just from that.
Awesome. All right, guys, that link is included below. David, I'm gonna have to come back, man. I'm looking at my questions we were supposed to cover, and we got through like not even half of them. So we're gonna have to do a part 2 of this, because there's so much more we can dig into.
I'd love to
talk about failure and recovering from failure and how to be daring after you failed. That's a whole nother can of worms we could dive into. So anyways, I figured this might happen because I knew we were gonna get off on talking about all kinds of different things, but I appreciate your time and expertise, and I wish you nothing but the best, man. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. This is one of my most fun and enlivening interviews. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Take care, buddy.